So, Alexia, so glad to have you. Thanks for joining the podcast today.
No, thank you so much, Alex. It's such a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So just hearing your bio, it's really clear to me that you've had one of those careers that's kind of moved around the world. You went from Australia to Italy to the UK, back to Italy again. So can you talk to us about what it is in you that sort of drove you to make those moves and to be an international person, so to speak?
Absolutely. I actually think it began back being with my parents. I grew up with a history professor dad and a musician piano teacher mum, and there was always art, culture, ballets on the TV. They are real Anglophiles and Europhiles. And I think from when I was young, I just had this huge desire to travel to Europe in particular. And I don't think that ever sort of went away. So I, of course, love Australia and I miss it. But when I was sort of in my mid-20s, it was like, if I don't go now, I never will. I wasn't quite sure how long it would be. But I just then took off, and I think I just kind of, I love everything about Europe, really. I love the history, the culture, for me, with the music and art, and I feel very lucky, and it's very special.
We definitely grow up in Australia, I think, hearing about European history, and particularly because, I mean, Australia is one of those places that has immigration from all over the world, but big contingent of people who've come from Europe originally. So I definitely have that same as you. It was somehow planted in the back of my head that this was the romantic place to end up.
Yes, it is a very romantic view, actually.
Yeah, I know. And then now you're reality on the ground. So great to hear about that as well. But tell us about the initial move. Like, did you have work already when you moved from Australia to Italy the first time? Did you have something lined up, or did you land and work it out when you got there?
Sort of yes and no. As I said, I had a job that I loved in Melbourne, but I just felt it was the moment that I really needed to take the plunge and make a move. So I got in touch with a Canadian concert pianist, Angela Hewitt, who is based, she travels around a lot, but she has run a festival in Umbria, Italy for around 10 years. And I actually just wrote to her and said, I would love to come and work with you. Is that possible? And over sort of a few emails and a sort of semi-interview on Australia Day via Skype, where I put my blazer on and I had my shorts on underneath at the beach, of course. She said, come. So I went to Perugia in Umbria for 6 months and I worked for her. And I always knew it would be a bit of a temporary stop because I wanted to spend some time in Italy again, for sort of the romance and being in Italy and seeing the culture, but I did want to go to London. So while I was in Italy, I looked for jobs in London, and I think I was lucky with the timing. The South Bank Centre at that time had done a bit of a shuffle of staffing, and so they had a few jobs advertised, and I applied and wasn't really sure if I had a chance or not, but worked really hard on my application and then got an interview and then a second interview and was offered a job there.
Fantastic. And so had you actually been to the UK in person? Did you meet anybody before you secured the job, or was all that done remotely too?
Well, I did fly over from Italy for the interview. So I was in Italy when I was doing all that. And the first initial phone calls were via phone. And then I flew over for an interview. Again, such a luxury of Europe, sort of short,
zipping around
flight between countries. And so I had the first interview and had a weekend there, which was also wonderful. And a very good friend of mine from Australia lives there. So I caught up with him and other friends, and then went back. And then a few weeks later, they called for a second interview and I actually flew back over, and then they offered me the job. And so it also worked out quite well with the timing. The festival that I'd been working on in Italy finished up, and then 2-3 weeks later I moved to London and then started straight away this job.
So we often talk with people who they know they want international experience for the cultural exposure and just the breadth of awareness that it brings you. But it can be quite hard to work out. I mean, there's always visa restrictions or, local markets to understand But it sounds like, if I reflect on your experience, it seems like you've just had such a unique skill set in a very specific sector that it sounds like more of an international community, as opposed to perhaps like a bigger sector, like if you're an accountant or you're a banker, where maybe there's more of them. Do you see that as like there's a low supply of people like you, and that maybe that has helped some of these international opportunities open up? Or do you see it another way?
No, possibly yes, Alex. I think for me personally, I studied music back after school, and I think for me, the fact that I was pursuing a career as a classical musician and then got into the arts administration side of things, I think that has been a big positive as well on a basic level, because I think for theatres and festivals, they really appreciate if someone can understand it from the job from different sides. I think that, yes, I mean, I definitely don't, it's not always easy. I think I had some good timing, but it perhaps was, I mean, I think you're right. I think that being able to demonstrate that I'd worked at festivals and with international artists in Australia and in Italy, that was, I mean, that was kind of, I don't want to say that was kind of enough, but I suppose, yes, it is perhaps
that was your angle.
Yeah, exactly. It sort of maybe is a bit more of a level playing field, and it's a bit, in some ways it's easier to yeah, cross over to another country, because it does require the skills that maybe are a bit more transferable.
Yeah, there's a currency there in your background and your exposure. We've talked with a few people on the podcast who are in sports management events, and as they've said, similar to you, that coming from a background of having been an athlete, no matter what sport, having been an athlete, having been in those shoes, knowing the challenges, and then coming into the administration of events or the clubs, etc., was definitely a benefit. And so when we look at like athletes moving into management, there's usually a clear decision around, have I reached my physical, performance level? Do I just have more of an interest? And of course, with athletes, they have a sort of a shorter career in the top performing space. Can you talk about your decision to move from being the artist, the musician, into the management of? Do you remember what the factors were that were at play then?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was an interesting step for me. So I was in Melbourne. I was studying at the Conservatoire of Music in Melbourne, and I was pursuing a career as a musician, and I was practicing and performing. And then during my studies, my singing teacher was curating a series of concerts at a new cultural centre in Melbourne, Federation Square. And she asked me if I would help out with ushering and checking tickets and things like that, so which I did. So I did that as a casual job for a year during my studies, and then I'd actually just finished my degree and was thinking, okay, I now need to maybe do more study or work out what I'm going to do. And there was a job opening, and I was offered a position as an events coordinator at this cultural centre. And I have to admit, I do distinctly remember that I was a bit torn, because there was a part of me that knew that this would be the end of my dream to be a performer, because I don't know, I just kind of knew that I would, sucked in is not really the right expression, but I kind of knew that I was choosing a different path. But I thought, I was young, it was a full-time job. I also had to take it. And I do think that down the track, I would have got to this path anyway. I think at that moment it was a bit of a shock, but I think it would have happened down the track. And I don't know, I just started working, and I loved the work. And I think that things came naturally to me, because again, I think I understood it from the artistic side of things. I wanted to do well at my job, so I worked hard, and I kind of loved working with people and different organizations. So I think I really thrived in the organization. And in fact, I got promotions and sort of continued moving along. And there have been moments where I've thought, you know, really, should I have tried to keep as a performer? What if? But I do think ultimately it's definitely was the right path for me, and
Yeah.
I love my job, and I've continued to just, I want to work hard, I want to work, I want to meet people. I love it, actually.
Yeah. It's often, we think that sometimes there's this clear decision of, you know, it's presented to me and I know all my options and I can weigh them up. But just as you're explaining it, you were cognizant that there was a pathway you were choosing, but at the same time, there's a momentum and a flow. And sometimes we have to be aware to like halt the momentum because, as you said, that can be a pull, but also, you know, recognizing that when things just emerge as well, like you moved in the direction of management, it allowed you to keep this passion in the industry and close to the sector that you love, but just in a different capacity. So I don't know, I think it's nice to think that you can always keep reimagining, even if you're not, you know, in the epicenter of that performance. Yeah.
No,
And so tell us.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, not at all. Tell us about London. I kind of sidetracked you back to early career, but when you landed in London with the job at the South Bank, is it what you expected? Is it what you wanted for lifestyle and work, or how did that pan out?
Yeah, I think so. I just fell in love with London as a city. Actually, I personally think it is the greatest city in the world.
Really?
I think it's not an easy city. When people used to ask me, you know, do you like living there, I would say that it's like being in a relationship. You have to really put in to then get out, because I think that it's, if you just sort of, I don't know, sit at home, the weather's rubbish, people maybe aren't so friendly, it's crowded. To go to the cinema, you need to book in advance, otherwise you won't be able to go. If you see a top in a shop that you like, unless you buy it then, you will never see that top again. You sort of have to work at it, but then if you do, you see, you know, this sprawling cosmopolitan city, the different cultures, the different areas, the beauty, the parks, the palaces, the museums, the galleries. It's amazing. So I really loved it, actually. I loved my whole time there. The South Bank Centre is a really big, literally physically, art centre right in the centre of London. And so I felt very privileged to work there. So every day I would get off the tube at Embankment and walk across the bridge and see Big Ben and
All the
Tower
icons.
Bridge. And yes, it was very special. So that was wonderful. And I made some really great friends, colleagues, and that was important to me, and they became like my family, because I didn't have my family with me. And professionally, it was wonderful. It's a really big, there are a lot of people that work there, so that was a bit of a shock, because Federation Square was a very small team, around 20, and there was around 400 staff at the South Bank Centre. So it was a much more sort of delegated roles, and it was, yeah, I think, you know, culturally the difference between also the Australian manner and the English manner are quite different.
How did you adjust? Can you remember kind of what let you?
Yeah, I think I had to be patient, actually. I think with cultural differences, you have to accept them. I think if you fight them, you won't get anywhere, really. So
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
I'll share my own experience there. It was like when we first lived in China, I remember moving there as a, you know, really very wise and very mature 24-year-old, and really thinking, oh, I've got something to bring. I want to share, you know, the way we, you know, because our industry was fairly young there at the time. I want to show people how we do it in Australia and etc. And it was just so arrogant and you know, hard-headed. And I remember it took me about 9 months of kind of like really buffing up against some of those cultural ways. And we had this map of China that I had up on the wall in my spare bedroom, and I've been drawing little lines of where we'd traveled to, and it was about a centimetre in this whole big country. And I was looking at the map thinking, oh, China's bigger than me. It was really this awareness moment of, oh yeah, like they're not all going to change because I somehow came and bestowed my wisdom. So yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I learned that the hard way, as you said, of, you know, what's the point in trying to change people? Just take note and be aware and work with it. I don't know, it sounds so logical to me now, but I definitely wasn't acting that out.
No, it's true. I think for me, I really noticed it with probably like email culture and meetings. You couldn't, I mean, I think Australians are quite direct,
Yeah.
definitely not rude, but direct. And it's just the English are not like that. So just, you know, finding the right moment to say things, or not being able to really disagree, or it took time. Yes, and it took time to also meet people, you know.
Yeah.
Some people that sat around me in the office, I probably said hello to some of them every single day for, yes, 9 months, a year, and they still really didn't, they didn't crack. And then finally they did, and then we became good friends. But it took a long time.
What do you think they thought you were just another transient Australian, or you had to prove yourself
Probably.
first? Yeah. I know there's a lot of them that go through.
Yes, exactly. Another crazy Australian that's here for 6 months or something. So yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so how long were you there for in the end, the UK?
So I was there for just under 6 years, which went very fast, actually, in a way. Though it also felt like I was there, I felt very settled as well. And I lived with, actually, I mentioned it before, a really good friend that we went to university together. He'd lived in London for a long time, so I moved in with him, which was really great. He's a bit like a brother, family member, so that was a really good base. And yeah, I changed jobs kind of 3 times during that time, but I loved it. And then it finally, actually for personal reasons, it seemed like it needed to come to an end. my London time.
Your stint, well, I mean, 6 years is definitely a good period to actually learn. They say for any expatriate, you know, posting, anything less than 3 years and you don't really get under the skin of a place, whereas, you know, I guess you more than did that. So, but tell us, you moved back to Umbria, and you know, you're starting your career again from a not a standing point, because again, as we said, some of this industry that you're in is very connected and international, but you were getting to know Italy as a resident, a permanent, more permanent resident. So how'd you build up again once you landed there?
Oh, it wasn't easy. I would say that, I mean, probably like your China story, I suppose coming from, you know, good jobs in Melbourne and then London, you know, people said to me, it won't be easy in Italy, and the not just the arts industry, but the whole country can be quite closed, and you, of course, you need to speak Italian, and it's a very many positions aren't really advertised. It's all about who you know and all that kind of stuff. So, but I was very determined to crack it, but it did take time. I basically, I moved at Christmas time at the end of the year. I think I lasted 2 weeks without doing anything before I was like, okay, no, that's enough. I need a job now.
You got itchy, yeah.
Both for my mental health, but also I've been financially independent since I was 22, and that was also a big thing for me, actually. So I'd moved back for a man, which is probably
a man who is now your husband, so not some
my husband,
random man. Yes,
who I'd actually met when I'd been there six years earlier. So we did have a long distance relationship for 6 years, and so I did move back.
I have to say, he pops to my mind every now and then, because still he makes the best minestrone that I've ever tasted in my life. My mind always goes back to that one evening we had where he cooked for us, and I always think, I can't make minestrone like that. It's probably like their baked beans or something that's like bread and butter, but it's, yeah.
But it is very good. No, he's actually a really good cook, so I'm also very lucky with that. So anyway, I don't know, I think I was quite pragmatic. So of course I wanted a good job, and I, even from my last 6 months in London, I was writing to festivals and theatres and contacts, most of them never responding. So for some contacts that I was given or had, I would write 6-7 times and they may still never respond.
So really proactive, and you had to be super perseverant.
I just had to just keep at it. I then finally, we moved to a town in Umbria of around 50,000 people, and I thought, okay, well, I need to do something for my sanity and also to get a little bit of money coming in. So I actually thought, what can I do? I then met the director of the local music school, and he said, yes, we need a violin teacher. So I started to do some violin lessons, and being an English speaker, which is very valued, of course, they said, okay, you can teach a choir of babies and do a sort of English choir. I was like, okay,
fun.
great.
Yeah.
And then I wrote to every English school in the town to say I could do lessons, and one of them got back to me, and even though I had no experience with teaching, particularly grammar and things like that, I learnt on the way. And look, it was not always easy, but I think I did this for sort of probably about a year, with lessons, and as well as other my kind of professional stuff started to kick in as well. But I think it was a good thing for me to do. It also, I met people from the community. I got to know my way around the town, and at least it was some sort of work. So it was keeping me busy, and it was, yes, bringing some money in as well. So I kind of felt a little bit, I was doing something.
You had your feet under you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how did it build
finally,
up? Yeah.
Sounds like it's... Sorry, Alex, I keep interrupting you.
Not at all.
So I think it was just persistent. So a contact who worked in the Rome Opera and worked in the UNESCO, the cities of culture in Italy, after emailing him probably 10-15 times, he finally agreed to meet, and so I went to Rome to meet him, and he said yes, okay, he would help me with some contacts. So I got involved in a UNESCO event, which was probably the kind of first event that I programmed and produced in the town I live in Foligno, and again using the music school as sort of a stepping block that allowed me to use a theatre in the town, and so that was also a positive thing. I then through contacts in our town, I got to know an orchestra and festival in a close by town, and I had some meetings with them, and they said yes, come and work with us. So I worked with Perugia Musica Classica, and the festival they run, the Sagra Musicale Umbra. And then actually through them, I met an arts agency in Rome. So I then started to work with them. So it was all about contacts. And again, it definitely wasn't easy. It took time. It took many emails and phone calls. Some of the work, the projects worked, and some didn't, because again, I think culturally they weren't the right fit. And then I felt like it was in, I think 2018 that it really sort of, so I guess kind of 2 years of doing more smaller things, and then finally sort of building up things. I feel like it really started to kick off, and I started doing some work with the European Union Youth Orchestra, who moved with Brexit, relocated their offices to Italy. And that was a really fantastic organisation, and I actually knew some of the team because I'd worked with them in London. So I started working with them, and they introduced me to a conductor in Italy, Ezio Bosso, who very sadly passed away a few months ago, but I worked with him for a year, and that was a really wonderful experience. And also through them, I got approached to be the artistic director for a festival in Bologna, which was meant to be on in a few weeks, but obviously with COVID, it's not happening. But that will happen next year, and I'm sure that will continue as well. So I feel like it finally...
You cracked it.
it all kind of happened, and
Yeah.
then there's not too much probably, but
Yeah.
but it's time, and I think just persistence really.
Yeah. And so can you remember the mindset you had in those first 2 years when you landed on the ground in Italy and you're just trying to work things out? Like, we were talking about persistence, but can you remember how you were thinking or feeling, or like trying to approach it? There must have been highs and lows. So
Yeah, there were real highs and lows actually. I remember that I was emotionally up and down. I think I don't know. I think I'm someone that once I make a decision, I try not to think too much about the past. And I did that when
yeah,
I left Australia and in London. So there is a part of me that is very good at saying, okay, no, you're here. Let's make it
compartmentalize.
work.
Yeah.
But it was hard, I think, because I felt that I still was young. I still like to think that I am still young, but
Yeah.
it was my early 30s, so it's definitely not so old. But I suppose I felt that I'd been working in, kind of serious jobs for over 10 years, and it can be discouraging when you know that you could really that you could help an organization or give a fresh perspective, and that's just that people aren't interested, and it was tough. So
Yeah.
I think I was really up and down, but I just tried to keep going,
Yeah.
and I think I was lucky that my husband was always really supportive, and I think that I was good with the connections, and I think it's something that you need to be anywhere, not just in Italy. But I
Yeah.
do think I finally cracked it because all these connections kind of lined up, and
Yeah.
I just kind of you need to cultivate those, and you
It's a
need to
really good insight.
yeah.
I completely agree, because we so often hear people who, as I said, they want the international experience. Sometimes they're ready to take the plunge, and so they jump, into that new culture and get this real frenetic energy at the beginning of what I would say is like a more traditional job search, of trying to look on job boards or wherever jobs are posted in that place where they're, and then reject. It can be really, you know, really hard, especially as you said, you've come from somewhere where your identity maybe tells you, hey, I'm a professional, I'm valued, I do a good job. Like, why won't anyone listen to me? And we often say, you have to network. You have to, because you find slipstreams, don't you? It's like you send out
Yes.
50 emails and you follow those people up, and you can't be perturbed by the fact that 49 of them didn't come back. But finding those glimmers of hope and then following those, like mining those seams. But I think people don't think about it in terms of like a sales job. They think about it in terms of a job search, which is probably sounds a little bit, of a nuance, but you really are going out there selling yourself and you can't afford to not be creative about
Yes.
how you get yourself out. Yeah.
No, definitely, Alex. I think that's exactly it. You have to be creative and open-minded, and actually I think not you can't be too proud. I mean,
No. Yeah.
I think that I to be honest, I didn't want to be teaching English lessons, while I had been after I had worked at the biggest art centre in Europe and all this kind of stuff. But sometimes you need to do these things, and my work at the music school definitely opened up other avenues, and you kind of never know where things may take you. And
Exactly. Yeah.
I think also you may need to do some work with less pay or even no pay if it's just for a certain period. But yeah, you need to be creative and open-minded and stay in touch with people. I remember also during some periods where I was feeling really discouraged that I got back in touch with contacts in London that maybe knew people in Italy, and I guess just still it's the networking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly. And seeing where it leads you. And it's, in some ways, it's a nice analogy to your first decision about, do I go you know, performer, or do I go into management? You have this sense that, okay, if I start following that direction and chase down every lead and say yes to those jobs, it'll start to accumulate. I still need to be conscious that I'm not getting pulled away from my core mission, so to speak, but you know, things evolve and they do flow if you're keeping your eyes open for the.
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you love, I don't know, if you love comedy, if you can get a job volunteering or
Work in the
working,
bar. Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you honestly, that really may lead somewhere. And I do think that managers and bosses, they notice people that work hard and show initiative, and probably
Yeah.
now more than ever, you know, companies want people that just are hard workers and that are flexible and
Yeah.
need to
Especially right
be.
now when so much of the world is
Mm,
trending towards gig work and
yes.
project-based work, of create your own project, create your own job. I'm not saying everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, but if you can think about your career in terms of a portfolio, which is what I'd reflect back to you on, where I think you've landed with several different projects. There's no one employer. It's like there's these different things on the go and they're seasonal, but you've got a total portfolio that adds up to, by the sound of it, more work than you can hold at the moment. But if I was starting in a new place, it's like, how do I think about what I'm trying to do? What are the skills and the connections that I need to have? And are there other ways for me to get it? Not just a job that someone awards me. Could I start a blog? Could I, yeah, as you said, go out and, you know, contribute in a, like, organize the networking event, not just attend it? Or like, how do you create those own opportunities for yourself? It's, yeah, that's what employers are looking for, is you make your own fortune.
Yes.
And so tell us now, like, now that you do have your cup full, how do you manage that? How do you think about how you prioritize what you say yes to, what you say no to? Where's your thinking right now?
It is a good question, and to be honest, I think I still need to do some work in this area. I think after actually this whole freelance, essentially sort of working regime, still feels quite new, even though it's now been 4 or 5 years that I've now been back in Italy. I'd always had full-time jobs before that, so I think on a basic level, that's something that I found hard, actually, knowing how much time you should spend to different things and then making sure you're looking after yourself. So I think finally I feel in actually a really good place in my career in Italy. I feel like through the projects that I've been working on, which kind of they sort of roll over each year, so it's sort of the same people I'm working with all the time. I don't know, it's made me realize how precious time is, and I think it's just made me realize that it's not worth working on things that if you don't really want to, and because you will ultimately probably not do as good a job as you could, both if you don't have enough time or if you're actually not so interested in it. And I think also on the sort of financial side of things, it's also realizing is it worth doing it. So yeah, I guess this year I have actively actually cut a few things out of my portfolio because I just thought I just don't have time, and it wasn't easy. And as I kind of sent the email or waited for the response, I did feel a bit guilty or
especially when it
weird.
was so hard won as well. With the previous story, the first 2 years, it could be really hard.
No, exactly. And of course, I still have a slight bit of fear that, oh God, what if I've messed something up? But I don't know. I've just come to realize that I think I'm at another moment where I really need to think a little bit more about myself and my family and my time. And and it's just about choosing more.
Yeah, it makes sense. In some ways, that's the flip side of being in a portfolio, is that the decisions you make just come down to you. There's no right or wrong. There's no sort of industry standard, so to speak. It's just, how do you tune into your self-governing, decisions of, which is really hard, but it sounds like you're yeah, working it out.
I'm trying. I think this year, even prior to COVID, I just thought I'm doing too much. So
Reel it in.
this year is the year I have to change some things. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the process. I need to still get through probably until January and sort of finish off some things. But for me, it's mostly about time, and I just I need to realize that I I don't have time to do everything really.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it really. Actually, it makes me too stressed, and it was starting to affect other things in my life, with my just general well-being and being too stressed, being able to sleep and all that stuff. And I just don't think that's worth it anymore. So
no, it's a real consideration. I definitely feel the same way. And I know you've got a little person now too. So in amongst all of this, career building, you managed to become a mum too. And how does that factor into this decision that you're making around, decisions about what projects to take on?
Yeah, it's so yes, I have a little boy who's 2.5, and yeah, I mean, he's a big factor. I think the work that I now do, I largely do it from home. So in some ways that's fantastic and flexible, and I can sort of manage my time. But it does mean that at certain times of the year I need to go away, and sometimes actually for a few weeks, which is really hard. So no, I mean, definitely the family, I want to be, obviously I want to be the best mum I can be, and be really, really present. And one thing that I tell other new mums when they ask me, I don't know, I had so many friends and colleagues tell me that, once you have a baby, you won't want to work, or you won't want to do, I don't know, get dressed up and things. And I guess for me, obviously every mother has a different experience. I just actually think that that's completely wrong. I couldn't disagree more. I mean, this desire to work has not gone away at all. I, of course, know that, some things in your life need to change, but it doesn't mean that, you yourself have changed, or, you can't wear high heels to walk around the park perhaps, but you still may want to wear them at other times. So I don't know, that is also a big balance that you need, I think, to really listen to your body and yourself. And I don't get that right all the time, but I'm trying. But it's also, I think, for me it's been interesting that it hasn't diminished my desire to work or pursue things as well. So it's just juggling it all.
Yeah, it's a question of identity too, isn't it? It's you had a working identity prior to having a parent identity, and they come together as opposed to being, replaced, I guess, one for the other for some people. And I don't begrudge anyone who wants to be a mum as their primary kind of, because there's things that I think are fun about it that I just wasn't expecting, and things that are completely pleasurable. And then, as you said, like this, if you have a job that you love, then that gives you pleasure and identity, and hopefully things apart from kid and job too, because I know we often define our identities by our work and our family, but of course there's whole other spectrums. Even if you weren't getting paid, just to be able to get dressed up and walk around in your high heels, independent of that being part of work, is this is me, this is who I am. So I completely understand what you're saying. But as you mentioned, you have just come back from one of these trips. I think you said you were away for about 2 weeks in Austria. So tell us about that project.
So I've actually, I got home a week ago, so with the European Union Youth Orchestra. So I'm the manager of the orchestra. We sort of unbelievably, obviously this year, like every other arts organisation, we've had everything cancelled. The spring tour, summer tour, we've done digital things instead. But we probably back in July, a venue partner that the orchestra's worked with for many years in a place called Grafenegg, which is just out of Vienna. They got in touch and we spoke, and we said, why don't we try and have a 10-day residency in the autumn, in October. So we said, let's try and do it. So over the last few months, we've been working on this. So it was an orchestra of 85 musicians with the conductor Marin Allsop, and the main sort of impetus behind it was also to record for the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. So originally the plan was the orchestra would go to New York to play at the UN for this event. Obviously that didn't happen, but we said, why don't we still try and do this together? And I have to say, about 2 weeks before, probably in September, when the situation in Europe was starting to get bad again, I thought there's just no chance. How can we bring these musicians, everyone from a different European city, together? Well, we did. And so we had 2 weeks in this place, Grafenek. It was very, very special. And for many of the young musicians, it was the first and last time they've played in an orchestra this year, actually.
Yeah.
And it was very, very emotional. When we had the first rehearsal with the full orchestra, people were there with tears streaming down their faces.
Oh, wow.
It was, for us, the sort of management team, it was stressful. We had every 3 days over the 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, we had a COVID test to make sure that there would be no issue with that. We all lived in a bubble. We had dinners at a closed restaurant every night. For lunch, we had sort of a lunch pack which was left, and so the caterers didn't come in contact with us.
Wow. The logistics are just
so
many things to organise.
It was, and of course in the lead up, as so many airlines are in trouble, we probably had sort of 5 to 10 flight cancellations a day. So then we're rebooking on different flights. But it was amazing, and actually very, very, very special. So we had that, and I think, when we look back on this, I think it will be, probably thought we were crazy to try and do it, but it was also very special. So yeah. So I was away for 2 weeks. The orchestra was there for 10 days, and we got there a couple of days before. So I was away from home for 2 weeks, and that was not easy at this time, being away from family and everything. But again, I'm lucky with a supportive partner that he knows that that's part of my job and it's important to me, and we make it work.
Yeah. It's I can imagine for the people in the orchestra, it must have been, as you said, crying and having that moment must have just been an overwhelming feeling of it's live, it's real. It's I don't know, what do you think was going through their minds? Was it because they could feel the vibrations of everybody else, or is it because?
Well, I think all of that. I think for them, they've been sitting in front of a screen like most of the world for 6, 7, 8 months now, and it's their life. And to be on a stage also with quite a big orchestra, some of them may have been able to do smaller things during these sort of quarantines and lockdowns, but an orchestra of 85, I don't think any of them would have. And to be there with this in this theatre in sort of one of the homes of the orchestra as well, playing Stravinsky's Firebird, which is this incredibly emotional, beautiful piece of music. It was amazing, actually. It was very, and I think it was very moving for everyone. And I think for them, there was just so much joy and happiness, actually.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it was tears of happiness. That's good. How does it work with them practicing on Zoom? I mean, there must be delays, or I don't know if they can hear each other or get the timing right. Like, how does that work?
No, exactly. It's not great, really. So just for those reasons you just said, there are delays. Often the sound quality is not great. So being for a musician, that's kind of the number one, and you just can't produce a good sound. So I think that's also been really discouraging for a lot of young musicians that have, I think they've been forced into a real sort of professional crisis, even without possibly beginning their professional careers, to really look at, is this a viable future? And that's, I think, very, very sad. I
Yeah.
mean, all musicians understand that they need to be flexible and do different things, and maybe teach, and maybe record and do different things. But this year it's been very, very tough, as we all know, for
Yeah.
musicians and artists.
Yeah.
And
As
some
an
have
industry.
actually have given up. Some have said, I just, it's too hard. I can't do this. Others have gone back to university to do other courses. I know some of the musicians from the orchestra have actually, in this semester that's just sort of begun, they've gone back to do something completely different, like psychology or something like that. So we'll see. But no, it's I know many universities and conservatoires are trialing different software that is meant to be better than Zoom, or some of them more sort of meetings based. But I think it's of course also dependent on an internet connection, and if many of them live in the country, or in a house with both their parents working. And it's been emotional hearing people's stories about that as well. That some have said, my parents have both lost their jobs during this time, so I'm at home and I don't have time to practice anymore, or I've needed to get a waitressing job to pay for my studies next year. I mean, it's been a tough year for everyone, as we know.
Oh, it's just, I know, like financially, it's absolutely, like from the arts industry perspective and just keeping people afloat, that's primary, isn't it? Making sure that people have what they need. But then also from the artistic perspective, just having the time for the disciplined practice, because I'm sure practicing by yourself goes a certain distance, but then practicing with other people must just have a whole other element to it, and they're just not getting that professional development, so to speak, from because it's really tough. Let's see what comes out. I hope that it's innovation, and I hope that it's stronger musicians.
No, I know, me too. I think it sort of makes you realize, yes, there's sort of what also people are battling against. I've got emails from 20-year-old musicians in like Madrid that would say, I live in an apartment building and the building has rules that we can only practice 1 hour a day, and all that kind of stuff. And, juggling everything. Yes, I think for many musicians, and from young musicians to more experienced, it's been a big reality check. And I think many are trying really hard to find ways to make the industry more sustainable. And there's been lots of discussions around that, and on environmentally sustainable as well. We need to find ways to maybe not travel, to be so dependent on travel, but then also I think many have realized that music online can't be it as well. There needs to be a way to be performing live. And I don't know, for me, I think during this crazy year, the symbol of the hope of many nations, the symbol of hope for many nations is watching an orchestra all playing at home in their bedrooms, or the governments want musicians to sort of I'm not saying what I want to. I'm not being very eloquent at the moment.
I completely get it. They're part of this. They're part of the salve that helps communities, rejuvenate and feel hope and feel pleasure again. It's such a community service, and yet it's hamstrung.
Yes, exactly.
Really tough. Well, let's offer up to the universe some thanks for the patrons, who I'm sure are keeping going in their hearts, or if they can financially. And absolutely the musicians who are still practicing or finding ways to get around the barriers that are kind of limiting them at the moment, because I do believe it's the arts in general is going to be part of our reimagining of the next wave of who we are as societies. So I can't wait to see what I'd love to see your work. So I'm conscious of wrapping up, and I've got a few what we call rapid fire questions just to finish off. So if I ask the question, it's the beginning of a sentence, and then you just finish the sentence with whatever word or words that you wish.
Okay.
So a good career is?
Being able to do something that you love and having fun.
Yes, agree. I want my 20-year-old self to know that.
You'll be able to do everything that you want. Just be patient and don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah. Telling a 20-year-old to be patient is kind of like it's my 38-year-old thing to say to my 20-year-old self, knowing that my 20-year-old self wouldn't. It would be like, yeah, old lady. I woke up this morning thinking about
all the emails that I had to read, but trying to tell myself, Alexia, don't think about those until you turn the computer on.
absolutely. And then finally, my gift to the next guest is?
Have fun, and I think it's amazing being able to offer advice to young people or to people in your life. I feel like I've always been really supported by my bosses and managers, most of them women, and I really hope I can give back to other young women as well in the future.
Yeah, play it forward. I completely agree. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
No, thank you so much, Alex.